We are being hypnotized by people like this. Newsreaders, politicians, teachers, lecturers. We are in a country and in a world that is being run by unbelievably sick people. The chasm between what we're told is going on and what is really going on is absolutely incredible.
Oh yeah, dude. There's some Nephilim shit.
It's like we all know what's going down, but no one's saying shit what happened to the home of the brave. These motherfuckers, they're controlling us now, and no one's talking about how they made us modern day slaves. And everybody's just walking around, head in the clouds, and wanna wake up to a dead in the grave. But then it's too late, we need to be ready to raise up. Welcome to the end of days. Everybody is slaves, only some are aware that the government released.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to another episode.
Wow, low energy, huh? Just super low energy.
Did I have low energy?
Yeah, welcome back to this. Like, I feel like I'm watching Lex Friedman podcast.
I'm trying to be more cognizant because we've been getting a lot of feedback about.
Hold on, start it over.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to another episode of Nephilim Death Squad. I am David Lee Corbo, a.k.a. The Raven. That is Top Lobster, the father of disinformation and a huge pain in my ass. Joining us today is Nyx. Nyx, please, for the people who are listening, let them know where they can find your work and what it is you focus on.
Yeah, so my name is Nyx, and I recently started a podcast called Stygian Charters, and that's on all major podcast platforms. You can also find me on Instagram and X. And a lot of my topics focus on discerning conspiracy truth from conspiracy fiction, the paranormal, cryptids, the occult, Christian eschatology. Those are just mystery schools, secret societies. Those are just a few of the things off the top of my head that interest me and fascinate me. And I started the show because originally I started as a content creator and just researching, and podcasters started noticing my research and they started having me on their shows. And then eventually the podcast community encouraged me to start my own podcast, which I recently did this past summer.
And the name of that is Stygian Charters.
Yes.
Man, I wish I was smart enough to know why
so
that.
That's okay. I didn't used to know what it was either. So when I was trying to come up with a name for my show, I had this vision of like journeying through dark waters, and since the topics, often are dark, and taking people on a voyage. And I kept thinking about the Greek mythology with the river Styx and Charon, which a lot of people pronounce Charon, Charon. Unfortunately, the poor guy's forever associated with today's Karens of the world. But so I had this vision, and I couldn't think of how to make it work. And a little side note, I've always loved owls before I got into conspiracy stuff and knew anything about Bohemian Grove or any of that. But I've always liked owls, and I was scrolling through Instagram, and it was an ad that came up, nothing I was subscribed to, and it was this owl, and it had red eyes. I'm like, oh, that's kind of creepy. And it's called the Stygian owl, and it is in South America and parts of Mexico and the Caribbean. And when artificial light hits its eyes, they turn red. And I'm like, oh, that's weird. I'm like, well, what does Stygian mean? So I looked up Stygian, and this crazy synchronicity kind of unfolded where Stygian meant dark or pertaining to the river Styx.
When you say that you had a vision of you navigating dark waters, what do you mean? It was an impression that you had, or were we talking like a dream?
No, kind of just how I wanted to brand my podcast, I guess. I wanted, because like we were on a voyage and I was, the captain or whatever, so it kind of was just, an idea for the show. Not so much a dream or anything. It just kind of came to me, and like I was going to be taking people on a voyage through these dark subject matters.
One of the things that I really enjoy lately, and I just want to say this as an aside, is this community of sort of conspiracy content creators has grown so significantly in the past couple of years. Mm-hmm. And even the shows who haven't been around a long time are heavy hitters. We just talked to Justin Brown of the Promethean Lens podcast, and he crushed.
Yeah.
And let me put it to you this way. Nobody's ever asked me, nobody's ever seen what I was saying on the internet and said, hey, you should start a podcast. Nobody's ever done that to me. I still went off and did it, but nobody ever said that I should.
They've actually discouraged me. They're like, you should stop talking.
Over and over again. So I just find it interesting that I don't know if it's indicative of this age that we're entering, where suddenly people are waking up en masse, and some of us are being called to try to contribute one way or another with our own voice. But it's really cool because I think in other genres, it doesn't matter what a comedy podcast or a cultural podcast. There are always new ones that are popping up. But what I find interesting about this lane that we're in is that these people are popping up, making content like yourself, and having something real to contribute to the conversation. I've come to this place recently where I'm like, damn, everybody's got a little piece of the puzzle they're bringing to the table. And I just don't know if that's happening in other places. But it's cool to see what you're doing. And it's cool to see that we're in this just kind of this season of content creators boiling to the surface and having something to say about topics that are becoming difficult to ignore.
Right. Absolutely. I'm even noticing it just, out in society a little bit. I kind of test the waters with certain people to see where they're at, if they, suspect more is going on than, what's being told. And it's actually really surprising. A lot of them do think that way, but you kind of got to start slowly and gradually, and then eventually it comes out. So I feel like more people are waking up that might not necessarily be super open or talking about it yet.
Yeah, that's kind of how we started, right? We were doing like jokes on Twitter, not jokes, but putting out these weird feelers about the Nephilim shit thing, and that took off as a meme. But it also it gives you a nice segue to be like, but it is the fallen angels, and then you kind of start to get to talk to different people about it. It's a hard pill for them to swallow, and it's a hard topic to even approach. But once you start getting there, obviously, the fallen angels is already like well past Satanism. We're talking like that's like underneath, that's the very bottom of it. But if you can get people there, then you could talk to them about, well, they're actually doing mock human sacrifices to Moloch in Bohemian Grove, and also at CERN, and this is real stuff that's happening. So yeah, I don't know. We're trying to meme our way into the culture, I suppose.
I'm excited too for this topic because, to differentiate between like the LARPers and the more serious organizations that are out there, because you have Satanism as it's been propped up by Anton LaVey, and even its Twitter handle, which, by the way, like Top Lobster has gone back and forth with. I've had a short, but nevertheless still had an interaction with them.
The Church of Satan?
The Church of Satan, yeah. And so you can find their Twitter page. There are those who are doing it as an affront to Christianity, to stick their nose up at a culture that they still perceive as being Christian, which I would actually push back against that. I would say that we've come a long way since the days where you could maybe have an argument for lashing out against my staunch conservative Christian culture. That's not here anymore.
It's not.
So I don't even know what those LARPers are still doing, right? And then there's those who just enjoy even just the aesthetic of it, and it bleeds into all these other things, right? So if you like that aesthetic and you're sort of this person that dresses in what you might call goth or something like that, that is rubbing shoulders with some chick who's kind of into some washed down or watered down version of witchcraft, right? And so, just like anything, you have more and less potent versions of it. And so much of it has been characterized as almost a sense of fashion or a musical interest or something like that. Even I would go as far as to say, like, if you're really into Harry Potter, which some of these kids, I grew up with them, because I was born in 1990, so Harry Potter was, that was my generation, and some of these people, we're out here selling cloaks. Some of them were wearing them to school. Some of them were wearing. I don't know how to square that. All right, but and then of course there is the actual element of Satanism, Luciferianism, New Age movements that are much more aware that their roots are concrete in esoteric texts from thousands of years ago. Those are the real things. The ones that I just mentioned, they give people the ability to ridicule anybody who would say, look, Satanism. They give them the ability to ridicule it as, satanic panic. Right? These are just, you're blown out of proportion. Hollywood has tainted your view of the world. And so I am excited to talk about the differences between those things.
Right.
Yeah,
and that's what drove me crazy is so many people, when you talk about Satanism or Satanism comes up, they're like, oh, well, they don't really believe in Satan. They're atheists. And I'm like, well, time out. There are so many more sects of Satanism that you don't know about. So you can't really say that. Although the Church of Satan would like you to think they're the only form of Satanism, and it actually will argue with people, and tell them they don't believe in that. No one believes in that. But there are other sects which we'll talk about today. And I grew up in the 80s and 90s, and I remember like what they're calling the satanic panic. Now, granted, I think there's probably hoaxes in everything, of course, but I don't think this thing was an entire hoax. And there's some cases at some point I'll get to that show this. And I also got really upset with the Lanning report, which was done by an FBI agent in 1992, where he investigated ritualistic child abuse. And he came back pretty much saying it's not a real thing or whatever. But there's cases that have happened that suggest it could be, and that this is a topic that needs to be revisited.
That is something that's often dismissed, especially when it comes to the SRA angle of things. We recently spoke to Madison Clares. It was a really harrowing episode. She talks about her own experiences with SRA. And maybe there was a time where you could dismiss it as, whatever, satanic panic, something like that.
Right.
But in 2024, the amount of personal testimony has become so overwhelming, and the patterns from one testimony to the next have created such a clear and concise picture of what goes on and who's involved, that it is ridiculous when people dismiss it, especially off the back of Epstein. I mean,
Yes.
We just had, shout out Top Lobster recently. Didn't you re-release a shirt, Epstein Didn't Kill Himself? Which I think is incredibly potent right now because of the, everything that's going on with Diddy. And but when you have those things that are indisputable elements of our lives here in 2024, to turn around then and say, it's such a great, I'm just glad, I think it's a great, we're looking at it right now for the audio listeners, toplobster.com, Epstein Didn't Kill Himself shirt. I think it's time to bring it back. I think it's time to reopen this conversation. I have a feeling it's going to happen regardless of whether or not we think it's time, but it's just a ridiculous notion.
Yeah, I'm just thinking now, I brought back another design that I never released, because we need to kind of remember what happened. This one here that says the science isn't settled. I know it's like
another banger, by the way. Great.
We're a couple of years out of it, but like, guys, we forgot what they did. They shut down the world. This is not. Maybe it is tied into Satanism, what we're going to talk about here today. But don't forget, people. I'm still pissed.
It speaks to our ability to memory hold things, right? Shout out Don Jeffries. We just went through such a harrowing experience in both the Epstein thing and the lockdowns. And all of a sudden we've turned this corner where like there are people who scoff at any kind of dissenting opinion associated with those two topics. So our ability to mull over something and just keep it moving and go back to the old narrative is it's kind of unbelievable. So when it comes to this whole satanic panic thing, which in my opinion, it feels a lot like the CIA coining the term conspiracy theorists around the JFK assassination, where certainly there are room for unhinged conspiracy theories, but it's a terminology that's used to dismiss critical thinkers and dissenting opinion. So when it comes to satanic panic, surely there are people who are blowing the alarm for unfounded reasons, but then surely what we know now has shown us that there are real elements of SRA, occult practices, ritual ceremonies, and they're taking place at the highest level. So what are your opinions then back in the 80s and 90s? I mean, this was really a terminology that was coined with the Charles Manson murders, was it not?
I am not sure. I don't think I've heard of that. That's not to say that, though. But within, growing up when I did, even to this day, there's police officers I've known who still to this day will be like, yeah, like there's evil shit going on out there. I mean, my dad, when I was little, I didn't find out about this till I was older. He was off-roading with some friends and they came across a place where the people weren't there, but clearly they were probably sacrificing animals there and everything. So, and you can't help but think, at what point do they maybe think about moving up to something human? Because when you like do sacrifices and stuff, like it's supposed to be, something of great value. Human life is the most precious thing you could do, especially a child. So, and people say, well, that's not right. That no one would do that. Well, serial killers started with animals, didn't they?
Right. Right.
A lot of times. So, but there's law enforcement I know who even to this day say they saw, satanic stuff. Maybe not necessarily someone was sacrificed or something like that, but they definitely saw stuff going on within society. So and the fact that there are so many accounts going around before the internet, I mean, for all these similarities and stuff and not having the internet, the odds of that are pretty astronomical. And it's been all over the world. And I know in the UK, they confirmed cases of satanic ritual abuse or crimes. So, and there's been ones we've had here, although when you go by the Lanning report or whatever, he makes it like super complicated. Like in order to, be a satanic crime or murder, you have to hop on one foot, hold your nose and your right ear and jump around. Like it's silly, the requirements. But I think the most important thing people have to look at is intent. Some people say, oh, they were just into like, heavy metal music and they were just dabblers or whatever. But I think you really have to look at intent. And I do have in my research, kind of the differences between dabblers and serious occultists or Satanists. So
when you see the Church of Satan, which is in many ways become a caricature.
Yes.
A sort of a scapegoat or even it's like they built their own straw man for you to attack. And so that way, when you did that, you would be ridiculed because they're simply LARPers. Does that resonate with you? Or do you think that there's a function within the Church of Satan where maybe there are levels to it?
There could be. I do know like Anton LaVey was quite a showman. So he was very much about, playing that part and then adding his satanic darkness to it. But I mean, it came out that he ended up he plagiarized someone else's work when he wrote the Satanic Bible. So, I mean, that kind of like makes him look like a fraud right there. I know Michael Aquino, who started the Temple of Set, broke off from the Church of Satan because he thought it was lame. He didn't think they took things serious enough. So there could be certain levels. I'm not sure. I do think Anton LaVey was still a dark character. I don't know if you guys paid attention at all to the Long Island serial killer Rex Heuermann. Everything that's okay. Well, to keep it short, like they found him in his house. And his daughter appeared to be into like the same kind of stuff. It's this book of a homicide detective with all these pictures of dead bodies, homicide victims. It's pretty horrific. And it came out, I think, like in the 30s or something. But there's these type of films called Mondo films. Do you know what those are? Like they pretty much exploit human life. Like it shows people getting killed. Or like Many Faces of Death would have qualified as like a Mondo film. But
this was back in. Are you saying this is pre?
So the book was in like the 30s or something, or at least the detective. That's when he did his work. But later on, years later, I don't know if it was in maybe the late. I can't remember if it was the 80s or 90s. They did a film on it, and Anton LaVey narrated it.
This show is brought to you by the Van Man Company. If you're like me, then you're constantly trying to avoid products that contain harmful chemicals, especially when it comes to skincare and hygiene. From fluoride in the toothpaste to aluminum in the deodorants, avoiding these products can become a full-time job. That's why we're excited to team up with the Van Man Company to bring our listeners a solution. The Van Man Company offers a range of incredible products, like their Miracle Tooth Powder, made from natural ingredients like peppermint oil, ancient sea salt, and baking soda. And the best part? It's 100% fluoride-free. They even offer an aloe mouth rinse. Or how about their tallow and zinc sunscreen, made from ingredients like organic olive oil, organic beeswax, and 100% grass-fed and grass-finished beef tallow. And there's more. With products like tallow and honey soap, coconut and magnesium deodorant, and peppermint beeswax lip balm, you can't go wrong. From head to toe, the Van Man has you covered. Listeners of this show can use promo code Nephilim at checkout to receive 10% their entire order at vanman.shop, or you can click on the link in the description below. That's promo code Nephilim, Nephilim, for 10% off your entire order at vanman.shop. From head to toe, the Van Man has you covered.
So, you know, that's pretty dark,
Right.
especially when these are pretty horrific pictures and everything. So, and I think the attorney defending a lot of the Long Island serial killer victims even said this appears to be the actual book appears to be something a lot of Satanists like to have. So for me to think that they're just atheists doesn't seem really accurate, although I think there's many, but like you said, I don't know if there are levels. There could be. And things could have changed when he died. And his one daughter broke off and went to the Temple of Set, and then she left there eventually and started her own satanic group.
Now, who is Set in comparison to Satan? How are these entities different?
So let me bring it up here. So I'll read real quick about like theistic or esoteric Satanism, which the Temple of Set falls in. And in 74, Aquino, a member of the hierarchy of the Church of Satan, and Lilith St. Clair, a group leader or grotto master, broke away from the Church of Satan on philosophical grounds and formed the splinter group Temple of Set. In the resulting theistic Satanism, practitioners recognized the existence of one or more supernatural beings. The major god, viewed as a father or older brother, is often called Satan, but some groups identify the leader as a version of the ancient Egyptian god Set. Set is a spiritual entity based on the ancient Egyptian notion of Exper, translated as self-improvement or self-creation. Regardless of the being or beings in charge, none of them resemble the Christian Satan. Instead, they are beings which have the same general qualities as the symbolic Satan, such as sexuality, pleasure, strength, and rebellion against Western mores.
That's interesting because Satan, as we've come to understand it, is more of a title. It's the adversary, it's the accuser. Seems to be a role that, or maybe even better, a spirit that is associated with these entities, and maybe even a role that they can play for a time, which I imagine could be applicable because they're always jockeying for position. Mm-hmm. And so I imagine that because amongst the fallen gods, lowercase g, there's chaos.
Right. It's so also a role. It's a role that seems like it's an angelic role because in the book of Job, Satan is allowed to communicate directly with God, but the fallen have to go through Enoch to talk with God. So
that's a good point.
There's a disconnect there. So like you were saying, there's many people that many entities that have worn this title. What does it mean? Why? Like, what's the point of it? I don't know.
And it almost sounds like choosing to make another organization around Set is a way of fine tuning it, right? Yeah. So the Church of Satan is in many ways a LARP. I'm sure you could speculate that within it there is some serious players, but their shot is too widespread. And it seems like an effort to make something specifically about Set is to narrow this and aim a little bit truer at
Right.
what it is they mean. So yeah, it does sound like he was like, oh, Anton LaVey has got something a little gay, a little too
Yep.
open to interpretation. We'd like to refine this a little bit and make it a little bit more potent.
And I think another issue was he didn't like is like people could start paying to level up in the Satanic Church.
Oh, is that was an element? I mean, that's an element in a lot of things. Certainly, the Church of Scientology, which you find L. Ron Hubbard is intrinsically tied into all of these. Let's just call them occultists before you go too deep into the whatever it is, that Crowley's involved in and all that. But that's funny that you can it's a pay to play thing. Yeah, there you go.
Yep, exactly. So yeah, so I figured I'd start off talking about what the occult is, and then what occult is, and then we'll move into the different types of Satanism.
Sure.
So the occult, although the exact definition of the occult and what constitutes as occult practices vary, it typically encompasses esoteric, supernatural, mystical, or magical beliefs, practices, or phenomena. Latin translates to what is hidden. Authentic occult topics have traditionally been kept secretive and only available to a select few. The idea of keeping knowledge a secret was done because they held the belief that it was too dangerous and powerful in the hands of the uninitiated or unworthy. In modern popular usage, the term generally applies to subjects such as Satanism, dark magic, and demonic summoning. From an academic viewpoint, it often applies to subjects such as astrology, alchemy, Kabbalah, divination, scrying, contacting or summoning angels and demons, ritual magic, certain historical secret societies or mystery cults, Hermeticism, magic runes, talismans, some forms of mysticism, and esoteric religious practices. So kind of all the New Age things kind of fall in there too. And a lot of people probably wouldn't think the New Age is a cult, but it's a cult. It's a cult practices there.
I would imagine that the branches of Satanism, for lack of a better term, could rival or far exceed the branches of Christianity. And the reason that I say that is because Christianity is focused around Jesus Christ, whereas any other worship is going to be focused around a body of fallen entities.
Right.
And therefore, if you can make X amount of churches all geared towards Jesus Christ, could you do the same thing for a Baal or an Azazel or a, who have you, each one having a more than one trying to do it the right way or how they see it to be the right way. And then you expand that across however many, some people think it's 200 that were the count of the fallen. But I would imagine that, there's an incredible amount of variation. And there is an incredible amount of organizations claiming to have figured it out and are doing it right.
Right. And I think a lot of these satanic organizations, or even some of the left-hand path, like occult groups, there's a lot of focus on self and not necessarily believing in a deity like God or Satan. But you should like elevate yourself to being a god. So there's that part of it too. In some of these groups is to enlighten yourself and for yourself to become a god.
Isn't that all a version of paganism? Because my understanding of paganism has become pretty, I think I've reduced it to the idea of worshiping the creation instead of the creator.
Yeah.
And that'll take many forms, right? So when you get the New Age movement, it's like, well, manifest to the universe, ask the universe, and the universe will provide. And it's like, well, who built the universe, dummy? And so you get that in a lot of things. And I think what's become clear is these entities, they would prefer the veneration for themselves, whatever energy you'll send to them, but they'll settle for you just not aiming your veneration at the one true God.
Right.
And I think it is within our nature, we have a proclivity to want to worship ourselves. So if you just make it about, that's kind of easy. It's like, yeah, you're the one that's doing it. You deserve the kudos, and we'll take that all day. That's an easy one to fall into.
Yeah, and that could be very appealing to a lot of people, especially people that may have had a bad experience with religion. I know there's, a lot of people I know who grew up in Catholic families, and they're completely like atheists. Like and it just seems like that's been a branch that's, turned a lot of people away from God. And I think, with all the abuse scandal coming out that doesn't help it either. And if you look at the Catholic religion, and I'm sure a lot of people Catholic will hate on me for this, but there's religious syncretism. There's pagan elements in Catholicism, and I've done a lot of research on that as well.
Are you talking about the veneration of like the saints and the
archangels?
Yeah,
yes, and Mary, Mary, yes, all of that, yeah. And then just
you're muted. Yeah,
sorry.
I don't know how long you've been muted, but you're muted.
Go ahead.
But we were saying that there's mother deity worship, right? This queen of heaven idea.
Yes, and Sumerian I think Ed's talked about when he's been on the show, and how that kind of rolled into Catholicism. But I mean, the crazy thing is, like, for instance, the obelisk in the middle of Vatican Square, St. Peter's Square, the basilica.
Right, yeah.
So in that, they said this on their webpage. It's clearly a pagan monument, and they said they put a relic of the cross in it. I'm like, how blasphemous is it to put, part of the cross into a pagan monument?
Yeah.
I'm like, that's fucked.
Yeah. I mean, this is one, we have some supporters of the show who have been with us for a long time. Shout out Emily of Nephilim Murder Crew. She's Catholic, and it feels like every once in a while on this show, we're just giving the Catholics a bit of heat. But from where I'm sitting, it almost looks like the issue with Catholicism is that there's too many holes in its game that it can be infiltrated one way or another.
Mm-hmm.
In other words, if your focus is solely Jesus Christ, well, good luck. Good luck subverting that. And the New Age movement is trying.
One of the things that did it for me with the Catholic religion, actually, you could say that, is the idea of the veneration of angels. And I forget which guest it was, but it's like they're actively tempting them to fall.
Yes.
And I think it was Brian from Demon Slayers. We were talking about Michael's Cathedral and all of these cathedrals that are like lined up in a straight line. And they're like some of the most fantastic buildings ever erected. One of them you can only get to at a certain time during the day or during the season because the water would be too high. And this,
Do you remember, Top, by the way, what cued the Michael conversation? It was Donald Trump praying.
Oh, right. Yeah. Yeah, that was, exactly. But the fact that you'd be trying to give worship to Michael and like basically make him fall, because once they accept the worship, then they're out of God's grace. They don't want to do that, and they're very strict about that. That's nefarious. And it's like you're going to church every Sunday and kind of flirting with this idea. It's messed up, man. You shouldn't do that.
Right.
Yeah,
and couldn't you do the same thing hypothetically with saints if they are allocated a higher place in death, a higher spiritual place?
Well, I don't know the spiritual rules for like humans that are. I don't know about that.
I don't know what it is either, but I know that it would still be paganism, right? Veneration to, especially someone that was human at one point, whatever you are now, a spiritual being. It's just the worship of creation over the creator. So do you think that's a fair estimation? It's like Catholicism is almost porous because of that. There's too many ways of entry for these spirits to sneak in and subvert.
Yeah, and I think what I was going to bring up when you guys were talking about like the angels and the saints is I never understood why there was a need to pray to Mary or any of the saints or archangels. I get having like, respect for them, but why don't you pray directly to God?
Right.
It's like he doesn't need a receptionist.
This is an important point to highlight. Shout out Doomsday Cracker. He says veneration is not paganism, specifically saying here veneration and worship are different. And I would say that there is a difference between those two, but I think it is psychologically a slippery place to be, because how do you police yourself in your own mind? When does paying respects to an actual historical figure, let's say like the saints who were martyred, or the mother of Jesus Christ, when does that turn from respect to let's not even use the word worship, an exchange of energy that is now disproportionate in such a way that it becomes negative? When does that, and I feel like that is a moment that you'd actually have to look back in hindsight, like, damn, I didn't even realize, but for the past X amount of years, I've been treating this person or that person, or this saint, or as some sort of, God, lowercase g God. And I just think that's a hard thing to do. That requires vigilance. Whereas worshiping Jesus Christ, it's almost like, I said it on a show the other day. It's almost like God came to terms when he's like, oh, they're retarded. I got to make this really easy for them. And so the sacrifice of Jesus Christ made it very easy for us. And I think that, to incorporate this amalgamation of all these different saints and such, it just becomes slippery. We're human beings, we're fallible, and I think it was made simple for a reason. Right.
Yeah, no. And when I say that about the Catholic religion, it's not the Catholic people I'm, looking at in a negative light, It's just, I think there's some parts of that religion that need to be kind of like revisited and looked at a little bit. I still think, all those people, have accepted, Jesus Christ as Lord and Christ their Savior. So I'm not attacking them as to, argue whether they believe in him or not, or are saved. But I think it's more, the Vatican and the religion itself and the practices they've instilled that the people have, generally have accepted, not critically thinking about what they're doing. Right. If that makes sense.
And at the upper echelons of it, when we talk about the Pope, I mean, it's just riddled with, I don't really see anybody out there sort of defending the Pope in a effective way. It just doesn't it just doesn't happen. Everybody's pretty, like Vatican City's incredibly corrupt. Who knows what they got in the basement? Who knows what the Pope is up to? They're shifting around pedophiles and such. You hear horror stories about one pastor, or whatever you would call it in the Catholic organization, being accused of some form of pedophilia and then just being whisked off to another. Everybody is familiar with the one really harrowing story about the guy who gets popped and then they send him to a blind kid school. And then he continues the abuse there instead of, being removed from the church. Instead, he's given a flock that's easier to take advantage of. So, there's a lot, but every organization has that to some degree. So,
especially organizations where, pedophiles can have access to children, organizations where parents leave their kids and feel they're safe and, think bad things won't happen to them, whether that's the Boy Scouts of America, gymnastics. It's happened in schools, so
swim classes, you name it. If there's children congregating, there's someone seeking to take advantage of them, and that's just the unfortunate truth of the matter. But going back to this topic, I'd love to, unless I have derailed you from something larger, go into this conversation about who are, in your estimation, the actual heavy hitters, the actual players that are, I guess, doing their homework and practicing to the book.
So that's hard to say. It's not easy to find out who real high up is maybe dabbling in these practices. I am having Dr. Colin Ross on my show later this month, and he is an expert in DID, the dissociative identity disorder, and the CIA mind control and how that has played into SRA. But, when I heard him speak on other shows, and I agree with him, he talks about, Epstein Island and that blue and white temple, and how that clearly had a specific purpose, even though they tried to say it was for music lessons, and there was like all these cots lined up in there and everything.
Music lessons?
Yes. And I've also heard that, I don't know if this is true or not, but there was no entry from the outside, that it was somewhere like, probably a tunnel Don't quote me on that, but I've heard people.
They had subterranean levels that were filled in with concrete, and on the side of the island there was a set of double doors that were like, if you had an old house and you had a basement, and you'd go to those big steel double doors and open them up, and you'd go down that way. That was what was on the side of the island. And I'm glad we're in this, by the way, because this is a topic that I beat to death all the time, but with no actual information. Just this idea that, well, sure, trafficking was happening, but like, why all this woo-woo spiritual stuff? And it's like, have you looked at the island? Have you looked at the temple? What are you talking about? So, there was a subterranean level. But
and there was, I don't know what it was, but they tried to say it was a tennis court, and they tried to compare it like on like Google Maps and stuff, and it looked like almost like it was warped or something, but it had these steep embankment walls, and I don't know what that was about. And then if you look at his Zorro Ranch, he had that weird geometric shape, and some people are like, well, it could have been a helicopter landing pad, but that was shown that wasn't accurate. So I feel like there's hints of things we see from the higher ups like Epstein that could be indicative of occult practices.
I believe there was even a large golden owl of Minerva.
Yes, they said it got knocked off by a storm or something. Yeah.
Right.
So
this is something that is a lot of people are resistant to. So even at the time, we were talking at the top of this show about how Epstein didn't kill himself was a meme. During that time, for some reason, you would get pushback about the ritualistic aspect of things, where like, sure, the logistics of a blackmail operation operating in the Virgin Islands, and we can get down with all that. Oh, he had islands all over his. He had cameras all over his mansions. Yes. Yeah, okay, that makes sense. That checks out. He was blackmailing Hollywood elites and politicians. Okay, fine. But as soon as you got to the part where like, well, what about the kids in the Greek-themed robes? What about the reports of them finding bones of children off the coast of Little St. James? That was one of the things that came to the light right after he was arrested for the second time, and before he killed himself. There was a lot of really interesting conversation being had on the internet about pictures emerging of him still being on the island. So you can decide for yourself whether or not the guy that died in prison was even him at all. I would lean towards not him. But there was a lot of stuff that was being talked about that never made it to like the final conversation.
Right.
And one of those things were the bones of children. So yeah, I mean, I don't know what it is about human beings. We're so hesitant to accept this idea, even though it's been happening since the dawn of time, to the same gods in the same ritualistic fashion and by the elites. Right. And here we are now, and it's like, no, not that part.
Well, I mean, if you think about it, like some of the oldest religions are like Hinduism, Judaism. Like if they're still around, why couldn't, one of those other religions still be hanging around? Like,
yeah, I don't know what it is. If the propaganda machine has just done a really good job of associating those ideas with fantasy, I think that might have something to do with it. These cultural machines and intelligence agencies, they do a really good job. They understand human psychology, and they know what we're prone to do and what we're not. So I think they just laid it out perfectly and got us to a point where even though this thing's been happening since all of our time here on this planet as a species, now all of a sudden on the tail end of things, we don't believe it anymore. It's actually kind of impressive.
Yeah, for sure. So next I was going to talk about what a cult is. And that's a group or movement held together by a shared commitment to a charismatic leader or ideology. They are associated with religious practices, but the occult is just a practice. In a cult, there can be occult practices. However, not all cults practice the occult. So that's kind of the difference. The occult is a practice. The cult is led by a charismatic leader that people are following. There can be occult practices in certain cults, and while others there isn't, so it can vary. So moving on, now I'm going to start talking about the different types of Satanism. So I'm going to first touch on reactive Satanism, and it's also known as adolescent Satanism, and it refers to a group of individuals who adopt the stories of mainstream religion but invert its value. Thus, Satan is still evil as defined by Christianity, but one to be worshipped rather than shunned or feared. Think 1980s adolescents inverting Christianity with Gnostic elements, inspired by black metal, Christian scare propaganda, role-playing games, and horror imagery, and engaging in petty crimes. So this was kind of like, the teens back in the 80s, kind of, having that goth look and into the things that were considered satanic, like Dungeons and Dragons was really demonized, which was a board role-playing game. And it became such a big thing. And, what's a kid going to do when you say, don't do that? That's wrong. That's bad. We're going to keep doing it. So that kind of was used in the Satanic Panic too, is, keep your kids away from this stuff. Don't let them listen to heavy metal. Don't let them play Dungeons and Dragons, things like that. So that kind of touches on like the reactive Satanism aspect of things. So the next is rationalistic Satanism, and this is the highly secularized and atheistic type of Satanism found in the 1960s by American author and occultist Anton Szandor LaVey. He created the Satanic Bible and formed the Church of Satan, the most well-known satanic organization. LaVey Satanism is atheistic. According to LaVey, neither God nor Satan are actual beings. The only God is in LaVey Satanism is the Satanist himself. Instead, Satan is a symbol of representing qualities embraced by the Satanist. Satanism, defined by LaVey, is a celebration of the self, and it encourages people to seek their own truths, indulge in desires without fear of social taboos, and the perfect self. So that kind of touches on that atheistic Satanism I was talking about. The temple, or the Satanic Temple, would kind of fall in that too, although I have some serious questions about the Satanic Temple that I think they are not quite atheistic, but they're not admitting that either.
It sounds a lot like libertarianism or the Libertarian Party.
Yes.
Yeah. Unfortunately, I came up in the Libertarian Party, and I think it's like they have some good ideas, but in its essence, it's filled with autism and Satanism, in my opinion.
Top, I don't know if, you've seen this, right? Where something's happening. Donald Trump Jr. is agreeing to meet up with Dave Smith. And there's this...
He's not agreeing to, but Dave Smith is like basically leveraging his Twitter following and his Joe Rogan appearances to influence cabinet picks for Donald Trump, the president.
Do you feel at all like we've had this conversation before about libertarianism and this idea of like the torch, for example, being their logo, right? And
I'm so completely estranged. Yeah, right. I'm so estranged from it now, whereas like people that are in the party, like, so I know Dave Smith, and he's like probably one of the biggest libertarians that you can get, and his co-host, we just spoke with Robbie the Fire, and I re-listened to that, and I was like, where did this conversation go wrong? And the conversation went wrong when I started to at first I was like, I don't think people that voted for Kamala Harris should be able to vote again, and I'm fucking serious about that, because it was a fairly simple IQ test. Her only policy was killing babies. And I think
legitimately was her only policy.
Yeah, I'm like, that's reprehensible. Mm-hmm. And right there, it was kind of like, then I started to go into the spiritual aspect of it. It was like, well, what happens to a nation when you just kill babies? Like, what happens to these spots? Who are the babies being sacrificed to? We're talking about human sacrifice here. This is satanic, or probably worse. I think it's Malachian. I don't think it's satanic. I think these people are working for a different entity, but that's another conversation, I suppose. And then he kind of like, the conversation went sideways. He got hostile with me, called me stupid. Then it was like, it turned into a debate. And then he actually left. He's like, I've seen enough here, and he left. And I'm like, huh. And I was like, well, that was really gay of you. But it seems like every time I have an interaction with a libertarian, it kind of always goes sideways once I start talking about these spiritual things, which now I'm starting to think maybe they're more aware of than I gave them credit for. I don't know.
Right. And I start to think about the idea of even liberty, and to liberate yourself from something in the way that these fallen wanted liberation from God, right? They want to be...
Yeah, it's all about the individual. That's what libertarianism is. It's like radical individualism to a point of mental retardation.
I feel like it would resonate more with Luciferianism, at least if you're talking about libertarian, which was the next next type I was going to talk about. But, there is that liberation, like that, we lived under an oppressive God, and, the serpent, was the liberator, very much the same way Prometheus was the liberator and giving fire.
Right.
And
that's
almost their logo.
Mm-hmm.
We have the Morning Star or Prometheus bringing fire. Like a lot of these things, because
Don't
sometimes
tread on
people
me,
will
snake.
look at the
That thing.
statue of dude, the "Don't tread on me" flag being a serpent when Jesus Christ gave us the authority to tread on serpents is like on its face. It's right there for you. And I find it interesting. And I just wonder, Top, if you've been feeling this way where it's like, oh, look at this. They're getting close.
I've been feeling. I said that a long time ago. I was calling them. I was like, this is Satanism. Luciferianism, I suppose, is a better word, which you're going to explain to us why later. But I've gotten an extreme amount of pushback for that. Especially, Clint is like, what the hell are you talking about? There's a lot of good people in this party because the ideas, especially during the time of COVID, were battling back against what was happening to us, which was clearly wrong. But I think, whittled down to its logical conclusion, you get a gay dude and a cop running for office, and that's exactly what libertarianism always is and always going to end up being.
This episode is brought to you by landofbiltong.com. Biltong is a traditional form of dried, cured meat which originated from southern African countries. And at Anton's Land of Biltong, they use premium cuts of Angus and Wagyu beef. They handcraft their own spice blends and slowly dry age their meats to give you biltong with a unique and satisfying flavor. Unlike popular brands of beef jerky that are filled with preservatives and chemicals, food colorings, and sugars, Anton's Biltong is made with natural ingredients. When I'm doing diets like the ketogenic diet or the carnivore diet, I can just reach over and grab a bag of Anton's Biltong, and there's no harm done. I'm able to snack and not feel guilty about it. I genuinely love Anton's Biltong. In fact, in between shows when we're doing a double day and I don't have time to cook for myself, I just walk over to the kitchen real quick, grab a bag, and chow down. Listeners of this show can go to landofbiltong.com and use promo code Nephilim to get 10% off all of their orders. Anton's Biltong plus landofbiltong.com is currently offering free shipping on any orders over $49.95. That's promo code Nephilim to receive 10% off your entire order from landofbiltong.com. Biltong is not just food, but a way of life.
And as a matter of fact, it's going to end up being worse. We've had Dave Smith on the show where we kind of pressed him on it. And we're like, where are you leading these young men? It's like, I understand the ideas of liberty and a lot of them are good, but ultimately you're rejecting God. So you're pushing these people to where? And there was not really an adequate answer, I don't think.
I like this from a Hot Dog Boy. He says, Gnostics say that the serpent was the liberator. And I'm like, the way this language and the symbols interplay with one another, and they've just been inverted because now they're good. And it is good to liberate yourself from a human being who is not an adequate leader. But when does the buck stop? It's the same energy, and it just was extended to God in this particular instance when it comes to the fallen. So I find that fascinating that that's happening right now, that this conversation is being had to whatever end that it will be had. I go, wow, look what political party is suddenly going to get to throw their hat in the ring, and at what a potent time in history if we are seeing biblical prophecy unfold. It just makes a lot of sense.
When you mentioned Kamala and her only policy being abortion, were you guys familiar with the Satanic Temple? They're trying to be religiously exempt so they can have abortions,
right?
Because it's a ritual for them, they said, to empower their bodies. And I'm like, okay, wait, I think, empower yourself or whatever. But whether you want one or not, most women, it's not a pleasant experience. And a lot of women, suffer mentally later on.
But they've inverted that recently.
Yeah.
Have you seen it, Nix, where women are like championing it?
Right.
Like they're now bragging about the amount of babies they've killed.
Right. And so I'm like, this is a really dark, fucked up thing that they're trying to claim it as a ritual to their religion. And that's one of the things about the Satanic Temple. I'm like, are you really atheistic? Because I'm not really buying it when you're talking about stuff like that.
Right. And I want to say real quick on the topic of abortion, it's very interesting that now, for the first time, I would imagine, I've not done enough research. Maybe there was some time you could point to in human history where this was happening. But I don't think that there was one where women were doing it out of inconvenience and freeing themselves up from the burden of familyhood and motherhood.
Not at this scale.
It's always been done as a sacrifice. Any historical context that you look back to for women willingly killing their children was a sacrificial context. And now all of a sudden, like, oh, it's not sacrificial. Now we're just doing it for convenience, because the fact of the matter is the numbers will show you that the vast majority of abortions happen because the individual's just not ready yet, whether it's financial or a mental
contraceptive.
Space. Right. Mm-hmm. Right. But they always use the outlying, what about
but it's like
abuse and things of that nature. It's like that's
a very small
percentage.
A small fraction of it. Yeah.
It's infinitesimally. I think I just.
This is like modern day Satanism, kind of what we're talking about here, where it's kind of the general aim of it is lost in the sauce, but what they're doing is still contributing to the main factor of what they want. So no, I don't think people that are like I don't know, Luis J. Gomez. I worked with him for a while, and he does like a lot of like he'll be like drawing, I don't know, satanic symbols and stuff. But I'm like, I know Luis. I'm like, you're not a Satanist. You're just, it's like edgy. It's like a thing to do. But what are you glorifying? What does this go towards in the end of the day? And right. Yeah,
it seems like God is actually concerned with you refining what you're doing and having a true aim, right? It's interesting, like one of the things that Jordan Peterson gave us before he died and was replaced by somebody else was this idea that sin is an archery term. I thought that was great because it means to miss the mark. So God does care if your aim is true. These other things, they don't care. They don't give a shit how sloppy you are, like, how unrefined your aim is. Just shoot, dude. Just shoot. As long as it's not making it to the right guy, we're all good here. That's what it feels like.
Right. Yep, absolutely. So next I'm going to discuss Luciferian. So they see themselves as a separate branch of Satanism, which combines elements of rational and theistic forms. It is largely a theistic branch, although there are some who see Satan, or also called Lucifer, as a symbolic rather than actual being. Luciferians use the term Lucifer in its literal sense, the name meaning light bringer in Latin. Rather than being a figure of challenge, rebellion, and sensuality, delving into the darkness of mystery and coming out better for it, think Adam and Eve and Prometheus. They stress the balance of light and dark and that each depends upon the other. While Satanism revels in physical existence and Christianity focuses more on spirituality, Luciferians see their religion as one that seeks a balance of both. The human existence is an intersection of the two. So we kind of went over how they looked at Satan as being the liberator in the Garden of Eden, and we were living under oppressive God. And I could see like people, this being an attractive concept to people, especially with today, all this self-empowerment and everything. So, and I feel like a lot of people are going to flock more to these types of like religions or ideologies because that's what like society's pushing today. Like, about, it's all about yourself. Like, yes. And again, that becoming a god and empowering yourself. So, but yeah, that's Luciferianism, and it's very much similar to the story of Prometheus.
It's a little bit more respectable.
Yes.
I'll admit. And the reason is because atheistic Lucifer, what was the term that we used before?
That was, rationalistic Satanism.
Rationalistic Satanism, right? So there's this large element of atheism in that. And to me, the reason it's less respectable is because you're dedicating a disproportionate amount of time to a LARP.
Mm-hmm.
You're dedicating time and resources in your visage, the way that you look and your dressing and the things that you're spending your time on to something that you don't even believe in, which I think is one of the worst things that you could do as a human being with the precious little time that we have here.
Yeah, it's very fraudulent.
To spend your time exactly being that fraudulent, investing the precious moments you have here in something that you don't even believe is ridiculous. Then on the other side to go, well, we do believe that this entity exists, but we just believe that he's a good guy. But you're wrong. But at least you've got something that you believe in. I think it's a little bit better. It's probably worse for, I don't know which one's worse for your soul. I don't know which one's worse.
It's also interesting how, there's a like conditioning happen in media. Like they're almost, saying Satanism good. I mean, like look at, what is that show? Lucifer.
Yeah.
Like it's almost like they're promoting this and saying he's not such a bad guy.
It's meant to provoke empathy.
Yeah. Or Sabrina, the Teenage Witch, the new one on Netflix, highly satanic.
Yeah, I recognize that in the culture too. You were saying before this worship of self. Everything is about like, it's packaged in weird ways. Mm-hmm. Protect your peace is one of them. Like they market it towards women a lot. It's like I had an example a moment ago that was really good, but you do see it a lot. It's definitely prioritizing yourself, your feelings, and who you are inside over everything else.
Yes.
And there's even little catchphrases, like, how you would hit a Yas queen kind of a deal.
Mm-hmm.
Well, there's another one that's like, I don't remember what the expression is, but it just tells, especially women, to prioritize themselves. And we've really gotten into this place where it's like, one of the things that you see highlighted really often on like TikTok and stuff, it's like anecdotal stories from one woman's life. By the way, as she's in a beautiful kitchen, she's got like a nice island and, all the cookware you could ever want. You could tell her house is really nice. And she's sitting there telling you a kind of a harrowing story about the things that her husband doesn't do and the things that her kids don't do. And she's in this beautiful place and she's got, in comparison to much of the world, a beautiful life. As far as people who live well in America, we're in the 1% of the world. And she's just going off about how bad she's got it. And these kind of videos, they plague the internet. And the ending wrap up is always like, do what you have to do to prioritize you, because nobody else is going to do it.
You had Michelle Obama a couple of years ago, probably even pre-Trump, I don't remember when, but she's talking about basically like, you've got to go out there, you got to get your own career, you be a single, she didn't say single mom, but be a strong individual, strong woman, and you don't need no man. I was like, you're married to the fucking president, to the most powerful person in the world of the United States. What are you talking about? Why are you telling these people to do something that you're not doing?
Right.
Man, that's a great example. That's the most potent example. You just nailed it, dude. You just nailed it. You don't need no man. Meanwhile, married to the most powerful man in the world.
Well, I mean, man is debatable. Who knows? But
yeah. You got like, those hashtags too, like boss girl and everything. Girl. Yeah, everything like
girl boss.
Yeah, exactly.
Isn't that? So, I do feel like it. Maybe I'm stretching, but you don't need no man is like, without saying it, like you don't need anybody. You don't need anybody. And like, well, what about God?
Yeah, you're your own God. It's in a sense, right? It's kind of like boiled down.
Hustle, grind, girl boss, kill that baby, pursue that career. You don't need no man. That is like, there's so many ways in which these things, just like the symbols of the Libertarian Party and the principles, are like this weird mirror of Luciferianism, is the same way that this ideology that's being spread amongst women is the same thing as, it's like repeating the fall again.
Right. I feel like they're trying to, and the same thing with like, I feel like the family dynamic they're trying to destroy, and they're trying to like individualize everyone so much. Like you said, like, women, you don't need a man. Mm-hmm. And we have these, single family homes and everything. And it almost seems like with what they're putting out there today that they are trying to destroy the concept of a family anymore.
Yes.
And, very similar as to what you said, Raven, that a woman doesn't need a man. Now, granted, I think people need to look at like, you don't need one. You should want one, though. I mean, you should want, to have someone by your side and a team and a couple and stuff like that. But I feel like they're almost like nixing that too. That they're trying to
mean. Like, you don't need shoes.
That's the problem. Yeah, I'm not saying like go out there and get a husband. That,
no,
I
didn't think you were.
But it's like these people want a relationship. They want this stuff, but at the same time, they're like, I don't need no man. So it's like, well, he's just a sperm donor now.
Yeah.
And like,
I love that there are people that are planning to have children without, like, they just want, let me get, like a sperm donor, and then they're planning on having children without it. I know.
It's like, nah, you do need a man for that. There's a reason why, like, there's two people that do this. Like, you need two people just to change diapers. This shit is crazy. I got 2 kids.
This is a wild notion too. Shout out Xerox. They're literally calling babies parasites right now. It's so gross, and that's a narrative that's emerged recently, where Josie the Redhead Libertarian crushed at dispelling that one, which is, show me an example where a parasite in nature is of the same species as the host. That's not a parasite. That's called a baby. What are you talking about, man? But we've gotten to this place now where they're making whatever argument they can to try to justify this, and none of them are accurate. It's really just, you're afraid. Highlight my comment. But yeah, so you could tell so many of the big narratives that are running right now, as much as people don't like to hear it, they're just rebranding of satanic principles or Luciferian principles, whatever you want to call it.
Exactly. So the next one is the Process Church of the Final Judgment. If you've seen the Netflix Sons of Sam, they speak about this. Maury investigated them. But it's also known as the Process Church, and it's a religious group established in London of the 1960s by 2 people who were ejected from the Church of Scientology. Together, Mary Ann McLean and Robert D. Gerson developed their own practices based on a pantheon of 4 gods known as the great gods of the universe. The 4 are Jehovah, Lucifer, Satan, and Christ, and none are evil. Instead, each exemplifies different patterns of human existence. Each member selects 1 or 2 of the 4 that is closest to their own personality.
That's interesting. That kind of speaks to this idea that we just talked about, right, with Satan being a title. And I do think that, because people say, well, because it was a title, then, like, Satan's not evil. He's just doing his job. And I think there's probably room for that. But there's also room for when you do too much. You've broken the rules. You've gone too far. And I think that also happened, which is what we saw in the garden. So, but that is interesting. I just think that gives rise to, so many of these New Age beliefs. They're not even New Age. We got to get rid of that terminology because it's old age shit. But
yeah.
Isn't it funny how that works? It's like, keep saying New Age, like this just came about. Like, no, this is really old practice. But this idea that our ideas of good and bad are false. None of these actors are good and bad. They are putting us through a sort of trial. And I think there is a trial, but there's also room in the conversation for when somebody screws up. And I think that's what happened in the garden was Satan was there to be the adversary, to be the accuser, or to be the tempter, but took it too far and ended up screwing things up, which is why he had his, if you talk to Justin Brown, his priestly robes stripped of him and he was cast out.
Oh, that's a great story.
Right. Yeah, but the whole David Berkowitz, Son of Sam, Maury Terry investigated it, and there seemed to be a cult in the area, and that was an offshoot of perhaps the Process Church. I think they were calling it the Children or something. But if you watch that, you'll see, if you watch that documentary, you'll see them talk about it, as well as they were finding a bunch of German shepherds that were carcasses as they appear to be sacrificed. Let me get a sip of water here for a second.
That's always the case, though, right? That's why we're in this weird place where for the longest time we stopped animal sacrifice, and now people are incredibly worried about the nature of whatever's going to happen with the red heifers.
Right.
Because isn't the idea that you use the ashes to sanctify the tools to build the temple, but then in the temple there are recurring animal sacrifices?
Yeah, what's interesting about that is it seems like they quashed that story real quick because Hamas came out and pretty much said they were very upset about that, and it appeared to be one of the reasons they chose to attack. So, and I almost wonder if perhaps it's happened. Like, we don't know. But that
on that side, I suspect that it's already happened, and people don't even really, everybody knows the Hamas hang gliding situation. A lot of people don't remember that they addressed it and said that in part it was due to the red heifers. And I think there was an article written, one of the last things that I saw about the red heifers was it was creating kind of an uproar. People were getting upset that this was going to happen. And so Israel, realizing that this could end up turning into something significant, called a stop for all press surrounding the event. But does that mean that these rabbinic Jews who were pumped to have gotten their hands on a red heifer, or more than one, I think it last we knew was boiled down to 3 that were still viable. When you watch this story unfold, it was very clear, because they said it outright, that these people had been waiting their entire lives. Generations had passed, never seeing the fulfillment of this prophecy. And so for the rabbinic Jews that were involved with this process, this was, the height of their lives, is the way that it was made to sound. I don't think they stopped. I don't think they went like, oh, dude, this was really cool, but I could see how it's ruffling some feathers. Maybe we should pull it back a little bit. Like, no, I think they just stopped televising it.
Yeah, and I remember when I first heard about, it was actually before, it was a couple of years ago when I first heard about the red heifer, and I was like, okay, I see it in numbers. I'm like, but where does it say, it has to be done for the third temple? And that's when I found out it's actually the Talmud that says it has to be done for the third temple. And it was a ritual to cleanse people who were in contact with any dead bodies. And then my other question is, so these red heifers, they're supposedly genetically modified. So would it even work if they have something that's not pure and is man created or dabbled?
It's like another loophole. I mean, I guess we're getting on the Jew stuff, but they're constantly doing this. It's like they're trying to manufacture God's will or even prophecy. And I wonder of that sometimes too. Like, can human beings, can man, if you want to consider them man, bring about the second coming of Christ? Because it's kind of, that's what they do with every action that they take on the geopolitical level. I don't know. I guess we'll find out. But it's also like, how is prophecy written? Prophecy is not really written to say that, it's not saying that well, these things will happen naturally. It's just saying these things are going to happen, and then you get this. It's like, well, you're making them happen.
Right.
And
so I kind of suspect the answer is yes. Because if these things happen the way that prophecy says it, then that is it. And so to your point, Top, it's like it never said it had to be organic.
Right.
That it could have been a mission-driven thing to accomplish this and fulfill prophecy. But I mean, so much of it is based off of which way can they kind of
By the way, dog escaped, so yeah, I had to go. I knew it. I was like, I hear him. He's chewing stuff.
So the next one I'm going to discuss is anti-cosmic Satanism, and it's also known as Chaos Gnosticism, the misanthropic Luciferian Order, and Temple of the Black Light.
I'm going to already say that this one sounds like the most agitating version because they take themselves way too seriously.
Way cooler than the rest.
Cosmic Nerds of Satan. What was it called?
Anti-cosmic Satanism.
Okay.
So they believe that the cosmic order that was created by God is a fabrication, and beyond that reality is an endless and formless chaos. Some of its practitioners, such as Vexier 21B, and he's changed his name so many times I can't even keep track and seeing if it is the right guy, because him and this John Novite of the black metal band Dissection are nihilists who would prefer that the world to return to its normal state of chaos.
That's such a hilarious thing. Imagine being a human being and being like, you know what, dude? I think it would be so much better if all of this was just returned to chaos. I think that would be great. Like a formless, treacherous void filled with chaos, no order, no rhyme. Like, dude, you have a job at Chick-fil-A. And, I don't know if you know, but that's gone too. And those dino-shaped chicken nuggets that you're so fond of, they're not going to exist in this formless chaos. Right. I love that. I love it.
So these guys are from one of those Scandinavian countries, black metal band.
Yeah.
And I know they ended up killing a gay guy and they did time. And the one, when he came out, eventually he ended up committing suicide. But a lot of these anti-cosmic Satanists, they also were responsible for burning the churches over in like, I think it was like Norway or something like that. But yeah, they have a very much black metal presence to them. And so yeah, that you know, just death and destruction and nihilism is pretty much their theme. So the next one, and then I have a little tangent to share with you guys on this one that I think you'll find interesting. But the next one is demonology, and it's basically the worship of demons, but some sects see each demon as separate force or energy that can be used to aid in a practitioner's rituals or magic. The book entitled Modern Demonology by S. Conley lists well over 200 demons, which that's kind of weird because wasn't it 200 angels, 200 watchers?
Fascinating, interesting number.
From a multitude of different religions, ancient and modern. Adherents choose to worship demons that mirror their own attributes or ones with whom they share a connection. So when I first read this one, I thought that almost reminds me of like the Lesser Key of Solomon or the
exactly
Goetia.
What I was thinking. Yep.
So, which was wrote in the mid 17th century, based off the pseudographical text of Testament of Solomon. But what's interesting is I was looking for something, I think it was on Amazon, that had to do like with like Nephilim related. And this came out just, I think it was October 7th. It is a grimoire to contact Nephilim entities. And it's called Liber Nephilim, a grimoire of fallen angels by Frater Barabbas, which was the prisoner that was released between him and Jesus, and they chose to let him go. So that's an interesting name. But so this book, it says, the wisdom of the Nephilim, those who have been exiled by God and who taught ancient man the ways of civilization, awaits you within the pages of Frater Barabbas' guidebook and grimoire, Liber Nephilim. While the grimoire traditions have done much to enlighten the occult community about the various banned books of magic and secret powers, only Liber Nephilim works with the first of the angels to fall. Yet these are spirits that loved humanity, mated with mortal women, and gave birth to a new age of magic so long ago. Yet they were omitted from that medieval magical lore until now. Liber Nephilim is the starting place where these renowned spirits are again engaged as they once were to the magicians of the most ancient times.
Fascinating. That is very interesting. That sounds like something you probably shouldn't play around with, but something that I'm definitely going to look up.
Play stupid games, win stupid prizes.
That's it, yeah. Thankfully, all I do is collect books that I can't read, so nothing will ever come of it. It'll just sit on my shelf and collect dust like all the other ones do.
Yeah,
That's really interesting, though, because a lot of people within this Christian community, they get upset with us, for example, because they believe that when it comes to the Nephilim, we're really just talking about like the line of Seth or something like that. And that this idea that angels ever mated with human beings and birthed offspring was incorrect. And so, you know, this could be the case. You know, I'm not saying that I'm an authority on the truth or anything like that, but I do find it fascinating how this theme will pop up in not only so many different cultures, but so many texts that I guess you would say the enemy uses.
Some of these, I'm looking at the cover of this book, and some of these symbols came up. The one in the top right came up in the Mormon.
Can you pull it up on screen top? I'd like to see the cover of this book. Yeah, because as soon as she started talking about this, Nix, you nailed it right with this Solomonistic magic, this binding of demons and these seals in order to have them do your bidding. And then
this
when
one
it comes
here,
that's
an angel. I forget which angel it was, but this guy, what's his name? The founder of Mormonism.
Right.
Joseph Smith.
Yeah, Joseph Smith was like writing shit like this. Some of them were encircled. She was explaining to us if they're encircled, that means that they're keeping them inside of like contained, but they still want to talk with it. If it's not contained, that means that none of these are contained.
Yes, and so this is my issue when people get upset when they're like, "What are you looking at?" It's like practicing and looking are two different things. I want to be able to look over at what they're doing and be like, "Oh, okay, I know what they're doing. I see what they're doing. They're trying to do X, Y, and Z. They're trying to summon this entity. They're trying to trap that one. They're trying to
know thy enemy."
Exactly. I have no interest in trying to tango with a demon and have it build me anything. But I want to be able to identify what they're doing. And I think that that's one of the most effective ways to show that they are. So a lot of people, they get upset. And I just kind of go, there's room in the conversation for the Nephilim being of the line of Seth, and it's not really, maybe they were tall, maybe people back in the day were a little bit taller. But there are playbooks that your enemy uses and seeks to subvert you with, and this is what they believe. And it does align with Scripture. It's just whether or not you argue the minutia of the translation. But what good is their playbook if it's built off of lies? Mm-hmm. You know, I think that there's certainly deception within it, but when it lines up with Scripture, there's something there.
Right. And I mean, I don't know about you guys, but ever since like I read like the book of Enoch, the rest of the Bible made so much more sense.
Yes.
It
and
filled it.
I recognize that as dangerous. I'm like, the way that it plugs in and makes me go like, oh shit, this makes a lot of sense. Like, I also recognize that feeling in me might be something that somebody might want to achieve. It's like, got him, you know? So I'm still like, I'll entertain other thoughts. I'm not saying I've got it all figured out, but yeah, you're right, Nix. It makes a lot more sense.
Okay, so that was
I believe that Nancy knows it.
I'm sorry. I'm looking at all this guy's work now because it's just on Amazon. It's incredible. This guy's allowed to be on Amazon, but I got my racist T-shirts pulled down.
Today's episode is brought to you by PurgeStore.com. What if I told you that more people have died from parasites than have ever died from war? What if I told you that diseases like cancer, multiple sclerosis, acne rosacea, and rheumatoid arthritis can all be treated with parasite medication? Rid your body of these all too common parasites by using Purge Parasite Cleanse. Purge Parasite Cleanse is made with ingredients like zinc, carrot powder, garlic, black walnut. These are all natural ingredients that keep you safe while killing the parasites. And while you're on PurgeStore.com, try out their Digestimes to promote healthy gut bacteria and aid in digestion. These, as well as any other products on PurgeStore.com, can be purchased with a promo code NEPHILIM, NEPHILIM, will save you 15% off of your entire purchase at PurgeStore.com.
What's his name? Frater Barabbas. Yeah.
Frater
so he's got about 7 books here that are all about Wiccan witches mastering
and he just
the art of.
so happens to have the last name of the guy that.
I mean, it's he gave him that name.
Oh yeah,
he gave himself that name.
Point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think it kind of was a tongue-in-cheek gesture to like Christians, you know.
Mm-hmm.
That makes sense.
Being Barabbas. So the next, I think this is the last one. Wait, no, we got a couple more. So next is Christian-based Duotheism and Polytheistic Satanism, and it's a minor sect of theistic Satanism reported by Satanist Diane Vera. Is a Christian-based Duotheism. Its practitioners accept that there is an ongoing war between the Christian God and Satan, but unlike Christians, they support Satan. Vera says the sect is based on ancient Zoroastrian beliefs about an eternal conflict between good and evil. Another offshoot of theistic Satanism are polytheistic groups such as the Church of Azazel, which reveres Satan as one of many gods.
Mm.
So that sounds to me like Azazel held that title for a minute.
Right.
You know, where if Lucifer held the title of Satan, Azazel held it for another grip. I wonder too, when it comes to these bigger entities like Baal and Moloch, if they also have passed that title around back and forth. There was a who were we talking to, Top, where they were telling us a story about sort of this psychonaut, right? This guy back in the day when the MK Ultra LSD experiments were really happening to a larger scale. And there was a guy that was doing it willingly. He wasn't like a John that was drugged and kidnapped or anything like that. This is a guy that was participating.
Jay Dyer?
I think it was Dyer was talking about this. And this guy, through prolonged LSD use, would reliably commune with the same entity every time he went and get a little bit more information every visit. Eventually, this thing disclosed to him that it was Moloch and would soon be the king of this realm.
Well, of America, of
America,
like, the territory of the West. It was very excited about this and identifies itself as Moloch, which now kind of makes sense when you look at what we're doing here.
In particular, the baby thing.
Yeah. Do you guys feel, and I do anyways, like with like DMT or ayahuasca, do you think when people are on that, it thins the veil for them to communicate with these other entities? Because I mean, it's interesting how similar, like with DMT, they have the machine elves and everyone's seeing kind of the same thing.
Yeah, I think DMT brings you to another dimension. That is, I think it's people seem to have similar experiences on DMT. It's also fast, so I don't know if that's as local, but I know that ayahuasca is super local. That's like basically just pulling a veil back. So the people who are in that same spot are experiencing the same things. And some of my friends, they go and they do ayahuasca trips in the same place, and they mentioned, obviously having the same experiences, but one of the guys he saw the leopard woman. It's a woman with a leopard head, and it's like, no big deal. She's always around in this. Yeah, I'm like, what the fuck are you talking about?
Sorry, yeah.
This is normal?
It's not normal, but yeah, they're just peeking into the spiritual realm, but they're doing it. They think that they're getting some kind of enlightenment. They're definitely taking a break from the real world, but I think it's important where you're at doing this,
Right. Mm-hmm. And I think that's a lot of the problem too, is when you are from a part of the world that is, your spirituality is absent, and then you go and you have a profound experience, your feeling of amazement is what informs you to then adhere to this thing, which I think is the big letdown that the West has subjected us to. It's like we're so detached from spirituality, but it's a very real thing, and you will have a spiritual experience and have no one to turn to, and this will change your paradigm, and you'll think that this thing is the truth. It's like, no, this thing is an aspect of the realm that we inhabit. Mm-hmm. There's a much greater truth, but because you weren't armed with spiritual discernment, you just fell for this first thing that came along. So now you're worshiping a jaguar-headed lady. So when it comes to DMT, it's like, I think that these entities they're very real. That's one of the things that Christianity has really dropped. It says it. God said, you won't have any other gods before me. Mm-hmm. And it says it right there that there are other gods.
Yep.
Lowercase g. If Christianity maybe did a better job of fleshing this out for people, then people wouldn't have these experiences and get blown away by how profound they are and end up worshiping some lowercase g god. Or they wouldn't continuously go to a realm, subject themselves to machine elves or jesters that seemingly do nothing but insult them and tell them that they're crap and tell them that they're dumb, and it's like these things are like nagging you. That's what everybody goes. They go and have a DMT experience, and they're like, yeah, the machine elves told me I was retarded, and they were actually saying a lot of really mean things to me. They were giving me the finger, and it's like, yeah, that's what demons do, dog. Like when the little voice in your head starts whispering, like, oh, shit, nobody loves you, nobody cares about you, you're an idiot, you should leave, you shouldn't have any friends, you shouldn't have any family. Like that's the same fucking thing. Yeah. But it's profound. You can see them. Right.
And I think, the church is not talking more about spiritual warfare, allows people, or, people don't think about these consequences and they go and do these things. I think if we talked more about spiritual warfare, people would think, before they did something like a drug like that, especially like Top said, depending on where you're doing it out and who's surrounding you. So, but for sure.
I'm not suggesting anybody do this. I say this all the time. Psychedelics of any kind, if you're listening, because there's a bunch of people that listen to this show. I don't know where you're at mentally, number one. I don't know where you're at geographically, number two. Mm-hmm. And I also don't know, I wouldn't suggest it because I'm not an expert on how to deal with the spiritual realm, which you are entering into if you do these things. And I don't know how smart you are in that aspect as well. Probably not that smart because you're listening to the show. Suggest not doing it. It just seems like something. Yeah, it's like going into the ocean. Well, it's funny that Joe Rogan talks about this, where he's like, "Oh, I don't go into the ocean because it's just like shark soup out there." You're like, you're in the upside down, and there's like, I was like, but go into this float tank and take DMT, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, fuck you, Joe. We'll come on and tell you that though if you want to invite us.
Yeah. So I have 3 more left to cover of the types of Satanism. So the next one is Transcendental Satanism, and it's a sect created by Matt the Lord Zane, an adult video director. whose brand of Satanism came to him in a dream after taking the drug LSD.
Why does all this stuff sound very, very Jewish? Like it's been a lot of Jewish names. Now you're talking about adult entertainment, and I can only imagine.
Transcendental Satanists seek a form of spiritual evolution with the end goal of each individual a reunification with his or her inner satanic aspect. Followers feel that the satanic aspect in life is a hidden part of the self that is separate from the conscious, and believers can find their way to self by following an individually determined path.
That's an interesting concept, because I do believe that some of these, it's hard to unpack the terminology aspect of the self.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, what does that mean? Because it's kind of reductive. It almost suggests it's just part of you, which means it's not dangerous and yada, yada. However, I've had my own experiences, and I recognize that an entity that I saw was some sort of aspect of self, but externalized at the same time. It existed not independent of me, because I think I gave it the energy that it needed to take a more physical
like
form.
An egregore?
Maybe, but even that sounds reductive, because these are words and terminologies that are much more nuanced and loaded than they appear on their face. So when you hear egregore or you hear aspect of self, that almost sounds like it is a product of my mind and therefore is not dangerous. And even if you were to go a step further and say it is dangerous because it leads to depression and anxiety, and, you know, people commit suicide because of their interactions with these things, it's so much more than that. It is an ancient adversarial parasitic entity that is given form from your energy, and so cannot really exist independent of you. But its nature is biblical, and that is the thing that seems to get lost. You go, it's an egregore, it's a thought form, it's an aspect of self, and therefore you're in control. Like, no, you're not actually in control of it. It's wanting to control you, and you can stop giving it permission, and you can put up a wall, and you could block it out, and you could even cast it out. But it is not just, I can think of a bear with a blonde wig on, and that doesn't mean anything. Then that is a thought form.
Right.
You know what I mean? And that has no bearing over me. This fucking thing does. In fact, it can sway your entire life. It can affect people around you.
Right.
Like if you can bring them to a low place, then it can then behave in a parasitical way to them. And also, it has a lot to do with the eternal nature of your soul. So I just, those ideas, it's like mankind trying to take something and understand. You know how so many ways will dismiss a biblical precedent and then later prove it with science? And then it's like, not only have we proven that the Bible was right, but now, since we've used science to do it, we've actually restricted our understanding of it to like the nuts and bolts that we can understand. It's the same thing. We've done the same thing. It's like the Bible's telling us there are demons, and we're like, that's not true at all. And then it goes, well, they are true. Call them demons if you want. I'll call them egregores and thought forms. And it's like, okay, great. You're restricting your understanding of them. Right. Excellent job. And you've also proven that they do exist. Fantastic. Over and over again, we do that. And it's very frustrating.
Yeah, for sure. So next is the Satanic Reds. And they view Satan as a dark force that has existed since the beginning of time. Its major proponent, Tani Johnson, claims a pre-Sanskrit history of the cult and believes that individuals must follow their own chakras to find their inner force. That inner force exists in everyone, and it is trying to evolve according to each individual's environment. The Reds is an explicit reference to socialism. Many Satanic Reds espouse the rights of workers to throw off their chains. So again, you have that whole like kind of liberation element to it. And then it's all, again, your inner self, and it's all that same vocabulary, like you were saying, David,
Well, that's it. Yeah. Right now we're given this cultural narrative, and it's like freedom and liberation over everything. Those are the most valuable things.
Right.
And when do we reel that in? When we cast off an evil dictator? Do we go, the job is done? Or is this some deeper component of human nature that, like, once you pop, the fun don't stop, right?
Right.
That's what I'm wondering.
So this next one, the last one, I find interesting. It's The Call of Cthulhu. And it's based on the H.P. Lovecraft novels. The cults of Cthulhu are a small group which have arisen with the same name but have radically different goals. Some believe that the fictional creature was real and will eventually usher in an era of chaos and uninhabited violence, wiping out humanity in the process. Others simply subscribe to the philosophy of Cthulhu, a philosophy of cosmic indifference, that the universe is meaningless and mechanical system that is indifferent to the existence of human beings. Other members of the cult are not Satanists at all, but use the cult to celebrate Lovecraft's ingenuity. I love Lovecraft. I'm actually a fan of his books, but
you a fan of his cat?
His cat?
Oh, no. Oh, all right. Go ahead.
I've heard of his cat.
Maybe
Go ahead and give it a Google search after this.
Oh, great. Am I going to be scarred for life?
No, you're gonna be like, that's a hell of a name.
Yeah.
That's a hell of a name. You know what's funny is we just had Vicky Joy Anderson on the show, and she is talking about.
There you go. His cat was named. Yeah.
Oh,
I don't know.
Jeez.
The Wild Man.
That's an amazing
Oh
name.
dear. No, it was not. But I have heard he
It's probably
kind
a
of
great cat. Vicky Joy Anderson actually was on the show recently, and we were going to talk about H.P. Lovecraft in this book, about Cthulhu, but essentially describing transhumanism. This idea of ascending, our mortal coil and augmenting ourselves somehow in order to have everlasting life without the aid of Jesus Christ. So these things, I don't know. I know H.P. Lovecraft is a fiction writer.
I think he was channeling things.
Right. Because there's so much bizarre overlap, in what he was writing, and then from one cult to another, or some cryptid sighting or something like that I'm like, this guy, he seemed keyed into something. Channeling.
Like Stephen King, right?
Yeah.
And I think I did research a while back on H.R. Geiger, who developed the alien creation. And I was thinking the same thing about him, that I'm like, he's got to be channeling something. And I watched a documentary, and some of the people that worked for him also said, we feel like he was channeling something.
Right.
I mean, just the detail, like in Lovecraft's writings, or the detail in Geiger's work, like they're just so, they seem more than the actual imagination can come up with themselves. I don't know. It's just,
I almost wonder sometimes
very noteworthy
if our imagination functions at all like what we imagine it functioning. Because a lot of people's ideas, they seem to come from somewhere, and they used to be a lot more comfortable with the idea of the muses back in the day, that these were external forces that were giving you these ideas. The other day I was doing a stream, and somebody named Robin popped up, and they were a new listener, and they dropped into my lap a book called Angelology. And what was significant about this book was that it was about an uprising of Nephilim and fallen angels that were subterranean. And there were 3 major hubs where they were located. One of them was Siberia, the other one was China, and the third one was Indiana, which is very interesting to us because we've been following this weird thing happening in Indiana. Seems like there's Baal just like kind of, chilling underground in Indiana. No big deal. So when she said this, I was like, oh crap, I got to check this book out. Unfortunately, I haven't gotten through it because the language, I'm only on like chapter 2, and I have to keep putting it down because a lot of these books are pitched as fiction. And, for a bunch of reasons that are pretty valid as far as like, you don't want to claim that this is real. You'll become a laughing stock, but for those in the know, they'll understand when they read it, and you could just market it as fiction. And the language was just like, it's like metaphor after metaphor after metaphor to explain every single situation that's happening. And I'm just waiting to get to this point because this was marketed as fiction, how the hell do you know, or where did you get this idea that there are Nephilim and fallen angels under the ground in Indiana? Because I suspect that, and mine's not from my own ideas, it's from testimony of people who live in the area who have been having these experiences and claim to be seeing a throne room underground. Serbia, not Siberia. Thank you, Xerox. So, yeah, oftentimes, Top says it all the time. I think he's 100% correct. How he came about this information, I don't know, but Stephen King is 100% cued into something.
Mm-hmm, right.
And whether or not he's channeling, which sometimes I wonder, is that always an intentional thing? Can it just happen?
I think it could be both. Right? Yeah.
And so if you've been doing that since childhood, maybe you look at it as a not even a significant event. Maybe you look at it as like, oh, I just have these weird dreams, and this is where these ideas come from. Because so many big pieces of like musical numbers or ideas for films, there are so many cases where you ask the director, where did you come up with this idea? I got it in a dream. Or director, writer, whatever. I got it in a dream. It came to me in a dream. This episode is brought to you by Matt Rife and his team over at RealRifeTechnology.com, the home of the Real Rife machine. A Real Rife machine is an electromagnetic radio frequency device engineered by Dr. Royal Raymond Rife in the 1920s, used to address various health concerns. Unlike imitation devices on the market today, Rife Technology was co-founded by Dr. Rife's relatives and longtime friend of the show, Matthew Rife. Real Rife machines are the cutting edge in wellness technology. I personally own one, and I use it all the time. I like to tune my Real Rife machine to the frequencies that help with addiction, to help curb my sugar cravings. Their Royal Rife machine is recognized as a general wellness product by the FDA. They're great for weight optimization and fitness improvement, mental clarity and cognitive functions, sleep enhancement and mood balance, vitality and sexual functions, digestive health and immune boost, skin radiance and endurance boost, healthy blood pressure maintenance, and more. And while you're on RealRifeTechnologies.com, be sure to check out the other products they offer and use promo code Nephilim for 15% off your entire order. That's promo code Nephilim, NEPHILIM, for 15% off your entire order when you visit RealRifeTechnology.com. And like, maybe that's how some people really do categorize these things. It's like, oh, it's just a dream. It's a cool idea, but otherwise that's all it is. It's just a work of fiction. I think there's a lot of people that probably don't even realize they're being tuned into something that is a lot more real than even they're giving credit for, despite the fact that they're making money off of it, or it's what their name is associated with.
I would put C.S. Lewis and Tolkien in that same category too.
Yeah.
With the worlds they created. And I do think you're right. I think there's a lot of people who write things that are nonfiction, but they categorize it as fiction because otherwise it wouldn't get published.
Right. Right. What's her name too? And I think this is real. Somebody's gonna have to fact check me on this, but there's some precedent for, what's her name? The lady that came up, J.K. Rowling, and the way that she got the ideas. Because the sterilized version of the story is like, oh, she was homeless and she was on the train while these ideas were coming to her and she was writing them. But there's something else that goes a little bit darker, and I want to say it has something to do with channeling spirits, and that's how she got the ideas.
There's a couple interesting aspects to her. One of them is she has the tattoo on her arm, the salvo coagula from the Baphomet. She has that tattoo on her. I think it's on her like forearm or something.
Can you pull that up top? I'm not familiar with what that is. I mean, maybe if I see it, I will, but I'm not familiar with the name. What was it? So
it's Latin. It's I don't even know if I'm saying it right. Let me pull it up here. Maybe.
Probably just find what
is this right here?
Rowling's. Oh, okay.
Salve coagula.
Yep.
Solvent and coagulant. That's how my brain interprets that. That's like a scientific...
So what it means is to break a substance down to its basic elements before reforming it into something new.
That's
alchemy.
Spot on. That's alchemy. Yeah.
Yes. Now, if you look at Baphomet, you see it's on him too.
Oh, really?
Yes.
I'm surprised I never noticed that.
Yes, it's on his arms, I believe. Yeah. The one, on his forearms. If you have to zoom in, but
I'm sure it depends on the version you're seeing too.
Well,
I see. Here's a good picture of it. This one right here. It's kind of like zoomed in.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, not showing you guys. There we go.
Yes.
Yeah. So what is that? That's like this idea, right? When it comes to Satanism or Luciferianism or any of these fallen entities, they can't create, they can only invert. So they could take the things that God has created and maybe they can break them down to their fundamental levels and then rebuild them up to be something else. And that does kind of seem like to be their mission statement, doesn't it? Mm-hmm. It's like take these principles, these laws, these elements, the matter that God has created, and you can't destroy it and you can't create your own thing that doesn't exist.
Right.
But you can take what God has made and you could melt it down, destroy it, reduce it to its most fundamental form, and then rebuild it into your own image. And that's like the name of the game, man, over and over again.
The other thing I wanted to mention about J.K. Rowling, which was interesting, she talks about, I think they're in a shop or something in Harry Potter, and the Hand of Glory is mentioned, which it's a dried pickled hand of a hangman, often specified as being the left hand, or if a person was hanged for murder, the hand that did the deed. And old European beliefs attribute great power to the Hand of Glory, combined with a candle made from the fat from the corpse of the same person who died on the gallows. The candle so made, lighted, and placed as if in a candlestick in the Hand of Glory would have rendered motionless all people to whom it was presented. The process of preparing the hand and the candle are described in 18th century documents, with certain steps disputed due to difficulty in properly translating phrases from that area. So that's another occult concept.
That you don't just come up with on your... You don't imagine it. You can't imagine it because it has precedence for having existed already. Mm-hmm. The whole time I thought I wasn't smart because I wasn't rich, and all it takes is selling your soul. That's it. It's not that you're not smart. You're just not...
This show's never going to be successful.
Because we won't compromise. Here, this is interesting too. Scott said the Philosopher's Stone, which makes its appearance as the Sorcerer's Stone. So once again, there's this element of alchemy within it. Mm-hmm. Yeah, you don't imagine these things. You don't just come up with them on your own. How do you successfully, through your own imagination, come up with principles and objects and places and all these things that exist in some form or another already in somebody else's lore? And to her, I guess, benefit, I don't think that she spent a disproportionate amount of time researching all this stuff either. I think it was given to her.
This is the same story. It's the same story as the Genesis 6 story, or at least what the Book of Enoch says about the Watchers. They come down, they're given something, and in exchange they give you technology, knowledge, power, whatever. Mm-hmm. And this is what's happening constantly.
I wonder if J.K. Rowling has is she one of those
millions and millions of dollars? Yes.
Well, yeah, she definitely has that. But I'm wondering if she is one of these people who has lost somebody incredibly close to her, close to the moment where she found fame. Happens a lot, right?
Some kind of a trauma. Yeah.
Some kind of trauma, some kind of dead loved one, a parent, a child, a spouse.
Yeah.
I wonder.
Kanye West has that kind of story as well.
Right.
Have you seen the interview with Bob Dylan about him talking about selling his soul?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. That's a great video.
I mean, he looks so uncomfortable talking about it. It seems to be an honest account. Like, he just looks really uncomfortable about it.
Yeah.
It's like, but also nobody kind of believes that.
Oh, here we go. By the way, J.K. Rowling, there was a 7-year period where she saw the death of her mother. Okay. So the death of her mother, the birth of her... Okay, never mind. I'm sorry. I thought I was reading something else. Go on.
Yeah, it's like, when he's telling that story, it's like, well, who's really going to believe this in this age of people who they're not in touch with any kind of spirituality? Mm-hmm. Carlos Santana says that he's influenced by some kind of entity called Metatron, and they're like, that's so cute. Just keep playing that,
Oh my
that
God.
guitar. It's like
Metatron's an angel. Well, that's the thing is, a really masterful job has been done of removing spirituality, but then like giving it back to us as fiction. So everything, like we have these spiritual truisms throughout all of our media, but it's all fiction. That's kind of hilarious, honestly.
Right.
It's really funny to, it's really funny to do to us. If you're, I forgot what it was. Something happened. I don't know if it was the Trump assassination, but Top, you found an incredible amount of humor in it. Like, look what they've done. That's actually really clever and it's really funny. That shit happens like all the time where I'm like, it's actually really funny to do to us, is to completely convince us that spirituality doesn't exist, usher in the age of science and atheism, and then give it all back to us, but in the form of Star Wars nerds. You know what I mean? Like, that's really funny, dude. You really crushed it doing that, because there you go. You got all your spiritual concepts. They're still there. You couldn't hide them, but you could put them in a clown suit so people never take them seriously, and that's what's happened.
Well, this is what I do. It's like I lie to the people, and it's easy, and I think it's funny. The reason I do it is because I'm like, well, you guys need to wake up a little bit, so I'm going to make this as obviously satire as possible. If you believe it, that's on you, and I'll just laugh, and you'll wonder why I'm laughing. But I find it really funny. They do the same thing to human beings for like all throughout time. It's like you keep believing them. So hey, smarten up, people.
It's in everything. Like I've been talking about it a lot. My son watches Adventure Time. There are so many esoteric like principles, symbols, themes, and they're all accurate. The creators of Adventure Time seem to really care about like getting the names right, getting the sigils right, with a comedy bent to it, but they're kind of everywhere. They're everywhere. So it's hilarious that they managed to do that.
I feel like it's a subtle conditioning they're trying to do with this stuff and with putting it in media.
Right. There is something to be said about this idea that at some point, some people say it was 9/11. It's a giant ritual. We've all been initiated to some degree or another. We've all bared witness to some sort of Masonic ritual or other secret societies ceremony. We've bared witness, whether it happened on the stage at the Super Bowl or whether it happens in one of your favorite movies. And you got to imagine, too, like if there is spiritual ramifications for being subjected to a ritual, well, imagine if the ritual is embedded in one of your favorite movies. And it's a really dramatic event. And it's kind of the climax of the film. And the music is dramatic. And you and your family are sat on the sofa, like really tense and really absorbing this. And really, that's more impactful, if there is an impact to be had on your spirit or your mind, than it is to be in the audience in a hall watching a Freemason ritual going on, because you imagine that some of those people aren't really that locked in and that they don't really take this seriously and they're just going through the motions. But when you're sitting on the couch with your family and you've been watching for an hour and 20 minutes, like this is the best part, and you're invested, and all of a sudden you're subjected to some sort of large scale ritual, goes right over your head. If there is an alchemical moment when a person is exposed to ritual, then we've all kind of experienced that alchemical moment in one way or another, especially in the form of like Super Bowl performances.
Yeah, right. So that concludes like the different types of Satanism. And the next thing I was going to do, unless maybe this would be maybe for another episode, is ritual homicide and the types of Satanists categorized as criminals who partake in satanic or occult crimes, as well as talking. Go ahead.
Do you cover like the 09A guys?
A little bit, yeah. I do have some things on them, so yeah.
Okay.
That would be
including the offshoot 764, which is targeting children on platforms like Discord and I think Telegram, and they're grooming them and encouraging self-harm, suicide, going into buildings and schools, and I don't know if I should say what
right
here. I don't want to get this a strike.
Well, we're at the hour and 50 mark, and that's a big bag, which I think, especially if we can set that as the goal, the 764, the 09A, and sort of this thing, because one of the things that we were talking about recently is like John Podesta and Tony Podesta. You know how Tony has that decapitated body
from like Dahmer.
Yeah, and so when you're talking about homicides and the satanic aspect of that, I think of Dahmer, because there was certainly an element in his work to that. But this is a big conversation, and I'd like to come with a little bit, because there's something about this 09A, the Order of Nine Angles, or the Order of Nine Angels, and I think it was even Aleister Crowley who believed that there was a hierarchy of 9 entities in particular. Top, do you remember the name of that? I know we wrote it down at one point, but I've got so many notes here. But
1 second.
Are you guys familiar with William Ramsey Investigates?
Not tremendously.
Yeah, he wrote a whole book on the Order of Nine Angles. He's like super well researched on that.
Yeah, we should look into, what do you say, William Ramsey?
Yeah, he does. William Ramsey Investigates.
Okay.
Do me a favor, Nix, really quickly. Can you drop your camera down and put it back on? You've been frozen for like
I know. I don't know why.
Yeah, just don't worry. It won't kick you out or anything.
Okay.
Just come right back in, and it should work just fine. And if it didn't work, refresh your whole browser. Just refresh your whole browser. It's fine.
But yeah,
I'll be able to come back in or something?
100%.
Okay.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah. So the 9 gods in the hierarchy, that's like from the Vedic religion, the Egyptian religion, or the Egyptian culture, the ancient Olympians, Mesopotamia, and Crowley was talking about Lucifer and his council of 9.
Yes.
And the guy, if anyone's wondering, we should actually reach out to this guy, the guy Chad Riley. He has a documentary called Stranger Things of the Unseen Realm, and he covers that there. Yeah.
Okay, Chad Riley.
Reilly. Yeah.
Okay. Uh-oh, I hope she didn't get lost on the way out.
I know. She's like, which way? What room did I leave them in?
She's
back.
She made
All right.
it. Hey, yo.
So,
don't
everything
worry about
like
any
froze up. Like I couldn't do anything. I'm like, well, this is great.
Yeah, don't worry about it, because we can edit this out, so it's all good. What the hell were we talking about? We were talking about the 09A thing.
Yes, and my first episode I did on my podcast, I had William Ramsey on. He does a lot of really good research on the Order of Nine Angles. He wrote a book on it and everything, so he definitely would be able to give you like all the details on them.
That would
very
be
knowledgeable.
I'd be very interested.
Not very knowledgeable on the subject, but yeah, I do mention them in my research. I just don't. I'm not as researched as him on them. So, but
when you spoke to him, did he express anything that made you think that fallen angels had anything to do with it? Because that difference of 09, or the original 9 angels versus the original 9 angles, is interesting. And I don't think that just because it's angles, that doesn't mean, could be talking about the same thing.
Right. I don't recall him mentioning anything about that, but that's not to say, he didn't make a connection there or something. Yeah. So
yeah, because what were you, Top, if you don't mind going back to those notes, you went on a tangent there when she went away that we're probably gonna have to cut out. And I think it would be interesting for her to hear that. You were saying that it's in the Greek, that that Aleister Crowley also believed that there was 9. The Vedics also. So
that's Chad Riley's work, and there's like a couple of cultures that think that there are 9 gods in this hierarchy. The Vedic culture, Egyptian culture, the Olympians, the Greek Olympians, ancient Mesopotamia, and Crowley said that there are a council of 9 that serve. It's Lucifer and his council of 9. So that number 9 is thrown around a lot, and it's significant. So if there are 200 fallen, 9 of them are making moves.
Yeah. Let's see here. So 9 is a very occultic number. So that is interesting that they would choose that. I don't know. I just know that left-hand path, and they've kind of has some ideology in it, like white supremacist and some Hermeticism and pagan elements. But he would be the one that would be able to really give you a good breakdown of how what their beliefs and ideology are. But they do believe in committing crimes, embracing political extremism and violence, and carrying out human sacrifice. So they're also an occultic group. They practice magic. So, they
sound like a good time. Okay, so maybe worth reaching out to him. Well, there's certainly a lot of meat left on the bone when it comes to the topics that we delved into today. And I was saying to you before the show started that a lot of the time what we end up doing is we do these episodes with people, and it acts as a great introduction,
right?
Just to a different fan base. And so I thought it was very important that we get that done today. But very clearly, there's a lot more that we can delve into in the future. So we'd love to have you back.
Things do pick up from here on out too. So, but that was just, to kind of show that there isn't just one type of Satanism, that there's many different types. So,
right.
And that kind of, puts us into the next topics we'll be talking about, like ritualistic homicide, and some of these satanic crimes that have been committed. So, or groups that are committing them. So,
have you ever seen True Detective?
I love that first season.
The first season was incredible. Everything else kind of really got screwed
that's based off a true case, right?
I had no idea that it was based off a true case.
Yes, it was a church in Louisiana, a Church of Hosanna.
Top, have you ever seen the first season of True Detective?
No.
You should watch it. You should watch it. It's excellent. You probably really like it. I don't want to say anything that's going to spoil it because it's slow to start, but man, it's a banger. And I just don't think they ever pulled it off the same way again. That's one of the top shows I always recommend to people. There's the first season of True Detective, and then Penny Dreadful. For those of you who haven't seen Penny Dreadful is an incredible one. Unfortunately, they lost funding or something like that towards the end, and so they just called it in the last season. But everything leading up to it was incredible. So listen, it was great talking to you. One more time for the people, can you let everybody know where they can find your work?
Yeah, so you can find me on all major podcasting platforms. Stygian Charters. Stygian is Stygian. And then you can also find me on Instagram and X or Twitter, and Stygian Charters.
We got to get you on video. Do you have any plans so far for Rumble, YouTube?
Not yet. Like I said, I just kind of was starting off gradually. So as not to overwhelm myself.
Right.
But it is my hopes that I will be moving to video.
Well, for people, coming out and telling you that you need to produce a podcast, and then, just talking to you now, you've got what you should be doing video. It's just another, it costs you nothing. Right. And you're reaching a bigger audience, and if the name of the game
a little bit of your soul.
A little bit of your soul, yeah.
A little bit of your soul.
But if the name of the
game
is...
Are we making Faustian bargains here?
That's exactly what we're doing. But we're trying to wake people up. We're trying to give them information. We're kind of it's information warfare. And,
yes.
So you need kind of all hands on deck. I'd love to see you get a Rumble started or a YouTube started. If you ever need help, feel free to reach out. But I think that's all. Top, do you got anything else?
No, that's it. Well, subscribe to the Patreon, but that'll be included in post. We're bad at this, in post. It's easier to do stuff when it's recorded and we can edit. We thrive on doing it in chaos and live. And now that it's not chaotic, I'm I don't feel the need to be to know what I'm doing.
Gotta get locked in. There's got to be something bad happen. Something tumultuous. The people, they don't like when I say that word. They get mad at me because I say it wrong.
All right, people. We'll be back. We'll be back tomorrow. We have, who we got tomorrow?
Tomorrow is Tuesday. What day is tomorrow? I don't know. We'll be back, though. I'm
Shannon
sure we'll
O'Connor, Tuesday, tomorrow.
Shannon O'Connor. All right.
Be here.
All right.
Peace out, people.
Peace out.
The greatest hypnotist on planet Earth is a oblong box in the corner of the room. It is constantly telling us what to believe is real. If you can persuade me that what they see with their eyes is what there is to see in God. Because they'll laugh in the face of an explanation that portrays the bigger picture of what's happening. And they have.